Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Principal Liner Notes podcast. This is Sean Gaylord, and I am just very pleased to be here with the newly Dr. Andrea Trudeau, who is coming to us from Chicagoland. She's in a beautiful setting, and I've been, Dr. Trudeau. May I call you Dr. Trudeau?
Oh, you may. Thank you, Sean. Or you can also call me Andrea. I will answer to either one.
Either way, one, I love the fact that we both got the gray memo, as you said,
Yeah, yeah,
got the gray memo going, the short sleeve gray memo,
yeah.
and and two, we have been following each other in our respective professional learning networks for many years, and finally we're able to connect and have a conversation. So I'm just grateful that you're here on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's like totally filling up my cup on this sunny Saturday morning. Just so nice to connect with you live finally.
Yes, and one of the things that has always kind of fascinated me about your work, as is, and it's in kind of your bio on X, is you are the no shush librarian, and now I have been thrown out of many libraries in my time when I was an elementary and junior high school student, and raising all kinds of cane and sand, and one of the things that I was often told was to shush. But in your case, and I know that you have really cultivated just a really just powerful learning community, and so I'd love to learn a little bit about the why behind being a no shush librarian, which I just love it. I'm just so refreshed by that. I wish you probably would have thrown me out of your library, back in the day when I was younger, because I was doing, I was attempting to steal Beatle biographies and fighting over copies of Rumblefish with friends, and shooting rubber bands and all those things. But I love the library, and I love the fact that you're a no shush librarian.
Well, yeah. So this is my 27th year working in a middle school. I've been in the same middle school my entire career, and
Really?
this is my. I know people look at me very strangely when I
I
share
love
that.
that. I love that. I had no idea you've been there the whole time. That's amazing.
The whole time. Started at, well, I joke that I started when I was 5, but yeah, 21, right out of college, I worked in the computer lab and then was in the classroom, eighth grade ELA and social studies, some seventh grade social studies, and then switched over to the Library Media Center 10 years ago now. So this is my 10th year in, I think, the coolest role in a school. Like, I basically get paid to be the cool aunt. And I
Huh.
walked into this library. We called it the LMC at the time, the Library Media Center. And the librarian before me was amazing. She created a really rich learning community focused on literacy and connection, but it was a much more traditional mindset. So when I took over this role, I knew I had to kind of shake up the philosophy of the space because we were starting to realize that, we needed to create these active learning spaces, and it wasn't about compliance anymore. Kids needed flexibility, they needed student centered learning. And so I shifted the name. So we went from the Library Media Center to the Learning Commons. And the Commons is the idea that it's this place for everyone to come together. And I love the everyone here is not just students, it's teachers, it's administrators, it's parents, it's community members, it's even people virtually. And it's cool because I just get to create this really amazing active learning space. And I like to think of it as a learning playground. So when teachers want to try something and they're maybe a little afraid to take a risk, I'm there to support them. And what's great is I've already built such strong relationships in my school community because I had taught there for so many years and built some of the curriculum that's still being taught and worked with these teachers as a teacher. So there's a lot of trust that goes in, and people are willing to be vulnerable. And that to me is like when some really amazing things can happen. So I think the No Shush Library came out of the idea that acknowledging that learning is noisy, learning is messy, learning is fun. I work with 11 to 14-year-old kids. They are squirrely, they are hormonal, they are amazing. I love them. That's why I've been doing this for so long. And I wanted to create a space where they feel connected because there are some kids that don't feel any connection in our school other than the library. So I work on what I like to call sometimes the island of the misfit toys. Like everyone has a place in my library, whether they're an adult or a child. I want them to feel connected to my space.
Absolutely. And gosh, there's so much there to unpack that I absolutely appreciate. Reconfiguring the name of the space to convey a a sense of belonging. And one of the things that I notice, and one of my dreams actually is to visit the your learning commons, because I'm so inspired by it, and I'm so inspired by how you frame this, and I completely dig the vibe that's there. But sense of belonging is something that is crucial on in any age group, right? And being a former middle school teacher and middle school principal, because we get a lot of weird looks. I love middle school. And I've been elementary school principal for going on 5 years now, but I love middle school, and I love getting the weird looks from people when you tell people, "Hey, I'm a proud middle school educator," and
Mhm.
people know I can't do what you do, and I'm like, "Well, yeah, it's not for everyone." And one of the things that kind of drove my why, as and still does, as when I was a middle school principal, and even now, is cultivating a sense of belonging. And you've done that. Um, so what does that kind of look like, sound like, feel like? And I know you're very, very intentional. Like, just last week, I noticed on X, you put up some pictures of the new school year, and kind of things that you've done with the space, and those things. So how do you cultivate that sense of belonging for middle school students?
So there is a book I read a couple years back that you just made me kind of refresh my memory. It's called The Power of Moments by the Heath brothers, and it's this notion that we have these moments that are so pivotal, and we don't always see them. And when we do, it can completely change the trajectory of your work with others. So I'm very like goal oriented. I'm someone sometimes that gets super focused on like, I have to get this done. And sometimes when I do that, I lose sight of the social graces. But I've been really trying to consciously step back and think about, okay, in this moment, when this person's in front of me, how can I make them feel comfortable? What can I ask them? I lead with curiosity. That was something that I learned when I taught over in East Africa a couple years back, to lead with curiosity instead of judgment. And so it never fails. And I'm sure you've heard this. You'll have these new students and you'll hear like the reputation of this group of kids. I
Mhm.
really just don't listen to that because I'm like, I want to keep an open mind. Kids change, kids deserve a chance. We all, grow and evolve. So when this new class comes in, like I had my sixth graders come in yesterday, I am all about meeting people where they are at. So for some kids, it's just asking a little question. For another kid, it's like, hey, do you want to, let's play this game together. Um, just trying to connect with them in any way I can. It's one reason why I don't do self-checkout in my library because I want to talk to my students. If I have self-checkout, they're going to ignore me and they're going to go over there and scan. And I've lost this really incredible opportunity to connect with them. And like the proof's in the pudding. It was yesterday at 3:15. Our school day is over. I'm ready to head out. I had like seven eighth graders come in just to say, bye, Mrs. Trudeau. We can't, have a great weekend. And that just like means so much to me. So I think it's just about meeting people where they're at, being curious, trying to find ways to connect. Sometimes for some people, I have to really put myself out there more, and I'm willing to do that because I think it really pays off in the long run. And it makes me feel good when I can tell that someone feels better or, smiles or feels welcome in my space. So I really give of myself all day long. And I go home and I'm completely depleted, but it's totally worth it to me.
I love how you framed and if because self-checkout, in recent years and maybe more than recent years has been a thing, um, in certain schoolhouses. But the power of that connection of you checking out a book and going, oh my gosh, this is the greatest book ever, and then what you do is you develop almost like an encyclopedic um connection to the child, so that or if they're coming in and they're looking for Dogman books, which is great. Hey, I want to introduce you to something else. I remember very vividly the power of when I was in high school, and my librarian, when I came across, and it hadn't been read in years, the great Jim Morrison biography, No One Here Gets Out Alive. And I remember the librarian there giving me a very knowing look, like, oh, and she said, and I remember she said to me, "You'll this book isn't for everybody, but okay, and you're hip to the Doors?" I said, "Yeah, I'm completely hip to the Doors. I want to learn more about them." She says, "Well, this is the book for you." And I just remember that kind of like knowing look, that knowing connection, and then every time I would see her, be like, man, I didn't. Jim Morrison did this or the Doors, yeah. And she's like, and she go, yeah, yeah, they were something. So that connection was so meaningful to me. So I can only imagine, what with you checking books out for kids, the conversations and the relationships that are being forged there. That's powerful.
It is. And I'm thinking too, it's not even just kids. Like we have what we call like a genius bar. So I'm kind of seated and then there's this kind of next level up and people can come and sort of belly up to this little area. It feels very much like Cheers. So a lot of staff members will come on their plan time just to belly up to the bar. We always joke we wish we had something behind the desk, but we don't, just chocolate. But we have really great conversations and it's just sometimes it becomes almost like the Lucy booth where people just come and vent and they want someone to help them. Other times they just want someone to read over, an email being sent to a parent to just make sure it's worded correctly. And other times they just want to come celebrate something with us. So I love that there's so much humanity in our library. It's not just books, it's not just research. We're not shushing. I'm not this like it's funny when I ask the kids what they perceive as librarian and I'm like, well, they got the wrong gal because I break all those rules. We are very human centered and it's such a privilege and honor to do this job, to be totally frank. I love it.
Absolutely. I'm digging the pop culture references. Cheers and Lucy Van Pelt from Charlie Brown and
Yep.
Peanut lore. So I greatly value that. One of the things, and again, when I was and I'm a recovering music snob, okay, and when I would go into a record store, and if I couldn't find a Beatles album, or if there were any Beatles, or if and there are some that don't carry the Beatles, I'd walk out. I was done. I was the same way. I went through a John Dos Passos stage, and if a bookstore didn't carry John Dos Passos, I was out of there because I was like, the bookstore is not worthy, or what have you. So, you know, Andrea, I just want to make sure in the media center there is there, I don't know, John Dos Passos, don't worry about, but Beatles books.
This is hilarious that this is happening right now because yesterday I had a student come in eighth grade and he was talking about how he's really into music. And he's like, I love Smashing Pumpkins. I love Pearl Jam. I'm really getting into like 90s. And he's like, do you have any books on them? I'm like, well, let's go to our little music section. And we have a bunch of Beatles books right there. He snagged a really fat Beatles biography. He was so stoked to read that book. It's like, yeah, I want to read that. He loves Dave Grohl, so he wanted that biography, which I don't have. But yeah, so we for sure got some Beatles. But I do need to build up my music section because I'm noticing I have a student that came in the other day who plays guitar and he wanted some books. And then I have this other boy that came in yesterday. So definitely need to beef up that section. And that's why, again, that connection with kids, it helps me make my collection reflect their wants and needs, which is awesome.
That's very cool. I knew they were in there. I was going to turn this podcast off. I was just going to like abruptly end it if there were no Beetle books, in the Learning Commons, and I was just going to shut it down. But because my finger was on the end button. All right, because now this is the Principal Liner Notes podcast, and we do have all kinds of leaders that listen, and we have some principals and assistant principals, um, tuning in. And one thing that when I coach principals, when I coach aspiring principals, I tell them that there are, it's all about relationships, but then there are
Mhm.
certain relationships that you must make sure are nurtured within the building. There are different roles that you need to make sure that you are honoring and valuing because they are unique. And the relationship between the principal and the library media specialist is very, very, very unique. And one that I've always valued. So I was the annoying principal that would go, where are the Beetle books? I'm not approving any budget or whatever until we get something in here. So but for me, as a principal, the library media specialist person is a thought partner, and is a person where I would want to spring off ideas, because that the library, the Learning Commons, is that hub, is kind of the classroom for the school. It's the community center.
Mhm.
um so talk a little bit about that relationship from your side, and how to kind of harness that, and nurture that.
So I think from the librarian's lens, I think one piece that I am acutely aware of is just the idea of advocacy. So if there isn't a solid relationship between a librarian and administration, whether it's building or district level, sometimes advocacy is key because it's sometimes I feel like I'm the Wizard of Oz kind of working behind the green curtain. And unless I showcase what I'm doing and really take back the narrative and share through, Twitter or X, on our school Facebook page or parent newsletter, people don't really know what we do. And then they kind of lean into the stereotype of like the shushy cat lady, which I am definitely not. And um, and I I just want to make sure that they see what a modern day school library is and how instrumental it is to a school in general. And like you mentioned, it's just, we really as librarians have our finger on the pulse because I'm working with everybody. People are coming to me about everything. And sometimes they're coming to me about things they want to go to administration about, but they might not feel comfortable doing that. So then I can be that person that's, hey, word on the street. I'm not going to give out any names, but I want my principals to succeed. So if something is happening, I will have that tough conversation and say, here's what's happening. Let's talk about it. And sometimes I can be kind of that conduit between our administration and my colleagues where I can even bring back the tough conversations to my colleagues and say, hey, well, blah, 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 blah. So it is a really interesting relationship. I've really appreciated that I've been fortunate to have all principals like really support me. And I'm with gosh, this is now my third principal as a librarian. And all of them seem to really like check in with me and touch base on the daily and just come in and kind of get a snapshot of what's happening in the space. And so I feel valued. The library is supported. I feel like anytime I want to do some crazy creative idea, it gets approved, it gets funded, so I think that relationship and that advocacy is so critical for librarians.
Absolutely. It really is. And kind of in my experience as well, like that's where, because the library is such a hub, and there's a lot of activity that goes on in that place. And a lot of folks, there is this kind of misconception that you are the shushy cat
Hmm.
lady. But, when you said that, I think about that just wonderfully, kind of comedic scene in It's a Wonderful Life. It's comedic, but it's not meant to be.
Yes.
When George,
I know.
you're not gonna like what you're gonna see. What do you mean? And she's a librarian.
I watch that film every year, and every year I bust out laughing. I'm like, oh, the horror.
Or she's, George, had George lived, Mrs. Bailey, wouldn't have been this kind of lonely spinster librarian closing the library late at night with
But
the
I
hat and the gloves, and the shawl.
But I will tell you, even my own parents, when I went back to be a librarian, I was never planning to go down this path. It just sort of fell into my lap one day. My own parents were like, "What are you doing? You're going to get so bored or they're going to cut that position, or this is just not for you." I had people, or people like I think my in-laws were like, why do people need librarians anymore? And
Mhm.
that's the reality of right now is that sadly, there's a lot of librarians, their roles are being cut, their libraries, the collections are being farmed out, and it's being used as another space in the school. And the research shows time and again how critical having a designated space with a dedicated, certified
Yeah.
school librarian full time to service the students. So, like having a space, having the staffing, and having the financial resources are huge. And sadly, we are at risk right now
Yeah.
around the nation.
Absolutely. In this kind of, the funding wars that are happening, but then also there are blessings and curses when it comes to digitalization and Amazon and those things. So the school library in many ways is the only, and it may be the first point of reference, for a student to kind of see to get that bookstore ethos, that research ethos, all of the things that you and I grew up with. The library, the library is this kind of mecca of hope and civilization and ideas and discourse and freedom of speech and all of those things. And right now there are funding wars going on, there are culture wars going on, there and some of these wars are causing leaders to maybe back off, and I don't want to deal with this, or in other cases folks, such as who are aspiring for that role to, well, I don't know if I want to deal with all that, and or folks that may be leaving the role as well.
Yeah. And it troubles me too when people think just because we're turning to more digital resources that we don't need librarians, because at the end of the day, I am a library information specialist. Like I am trained to seek and vet information. And so in this digital age, when we have information at our fingertips 24/7, and now we have AI and the ability to create fake content so easily that can dupe people, we need librarians more than ever because we're going to be the ones that are supporting the digital citizenship piece and helping students with their information literacy skills, which is a huge umbrella. And there's so many subsets to
Right
that
on.
concept.
Right on. I always look to, folks in your role, for what's the book right now, the pick, what's Andrea's pick right now? What's the book right now that, you mentioned Power of Moments, and I'm a big fan of that book, as well, and the Heath brothers. But maybe a two-part question for you. What's the adult book right now that is like au courant for you, and that page turner, and then what is that middle school book right now that is like, man, this has got this needs to be in everybody's hands right now. Just curious.
So for the adult book, and I think this is something that every educator, parent should be reading right now is The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. I don't know if okay, you're nodding. Good. I heard about it over the summer. It's something that I think our district's going to really be digging into with our community. And basically, it just looks at how we are running a grand experiment because childhood is changing with all this technology available to kids. And so, as a child growing up, I was just out being bored outside. I didn't have an iPad at my fingertips all the time. And so when kids are bored, and I'm using my air quotes right now, they are putting themselves in front of digital content and it is rewiring their brains and it's changing the landscape of childhood. And so I have not finished the book, but I'm in the midst of listening to it. And I have to say, it's really opened my eyes. And as a mom of an 18-year-old and soon to be 20-year-old, um, there are some things I wish I would have known because I think my kids were kind of part of this grand experiment. But
Mm.
I have a brother with younger kids, and I'm recommending he read it because I'm noticing that there's some struggles with regulating of emotions and just even the cadence of my niece's conversation, the way she speaks, it's like she's mimicking what she sees on YouTube in these like makeup videos. So it's just a really eye-opening book that I would recommend all educators and parents read. In terms of middle school, oh gosh, that's going to be it's like picking my favorite child. I mean, I love all things Jason Reynolds. You can never go wrong with Jason Reynolds. I think right now, what I've observed is it's kind of been interesting when I look at the way that there's like a shift in reading. I really want to just open people's eyes to graphic novels, and I'm going to just give a whole format. I think sometimes people feel like graphic novels are sort of cheating or too easy. And so I've come across educators that are like, oh no, they can't read those. That's not helpful. It's too easy for them. But the reality is that the research shows that the language in them, the vocabulary is higher because
Yeah.
you have to be very concise, you also have the visual literacy component, so I really spent time. I'm grateful that in my school, we now have graphic novels like Cardboard by Doug TenNapel being taught as a class novel or as a lit circle. And what's great is I teach them all about how to read a graphic novel because there's an art to it. There's the gutter, the space between the panels where we need to pause. We want to look at positioning. We want to look at what happens from frame to frame. We want to look at the color palette. It's such rich text on so many levels. And I think in this age of this frenetic scrolling, and so much dependence on visual literacy, I think graphic novels are a great way to do this in a print form. So I am a huge supporter of graphic novels, and I would encourage your listeners to be open-minded. If they've never read one, I challenge you to read one, and I challenge you to try to bring them into your classes with your kids. They will love them, and it creates such an incredible conversation.
It's a game changer. I think of my great friend Jeff Howard, who's been on the podcast before, who is an aficionado of graphic novels, and he makes the contention, and I agree with him that it is a viable form of literature. It is a viable genre, and the influence of graphic novels, just in terms of, films and those things and it's just good storytelling. But then also
Yes.
from the empirical standpoint of, yeah, and I just said the word empirical. I think that's the first time I've said empirical on this podcast. But anyway, I'm with Dr. Trudeau. But but from the empirical we just went NPR here for just a second, from the empirical standpoint, in terms of what graphic novels do to promote vocabulary, critical thinking, creative thinking, all of those things. There's so many great teachable moments embedded in a graphic novel that any teacher can take into the classroom. I remember doing Fahrenheit 451 as a graphic novel, and just the conversation and activities that we do derive from there were just so rich. Anxious Generation, of course, is another kind of au courant book that many people, I need to pick up a copy. Um, and read. But many people, I remember you, I think you posting about it, and other folks that are mutual friends have especially this summer have really really taken a deep dive into. So I appreciate that on a lot of levels.
Thank you. And I do want to, I just, as you were talking too, I think also for students who are still, who are kind of at-risk readers, like I don't want to read or I don't like to read, graphic novels are kind of that like gateway. So it's my way to get them into reading. And then I can get them to pour through all these graphic novels. And then it's like, hey, let's go find another book in this other section that's got a little more prose, or let's do a verse novel. So it's a good like dipping the toe in if you have someone that's a little more reluctant as a reader. I graphic novels have created a lot of readers in my middle school library.
Yes, I can attest to that as well. Um, when I was a kid, in the 80s, I as much as I got thrown out of libraries as a kid at the school library, I still loved the library, and for a lot of different reasons. And one of the things as a kid was I remember when the bookmobile would come to town, and and maybe we talked about before we hit record about like retirement gigs. Um, for me, it's going to be the used record store, or maybe it is a used record store slash bookmobile or record mobile. But it just hit me, that for you, in another, somewhere down the line, I could see you driving around a bookmobile, or I'm just saying that could be
I
something.
love that idea. Yeah, yeah. I actually hope I will be doing some library building out in East Africa. But yeah, kind of the same idea, but just getting books into people's hands however I can, because they're powerful. They're really powerful. And I just love the power of story.
Speaking of East Africa, a few weeks ago, I had Dr. Marie Moreno on, and I know you tuned into that.
Yes.
She, talked about her work and her adventures in Tanzania. And I know you mentioned East Africa twice, and I would be remiss if we didn't go in that realm. So I'd love for you to kind of share, because I do know that it is something that is very close to your heart and soul. It is something that in speaking of advocacy and the work that you're doing. I'd love for you to kind of maybe share a little bit about that for those who may not be familiar or don't follow you, the work that you are doing for education out there.
So it all kind of happened as an accident. I was in my PhD program, and there was a program. I got an email that said you could apply for this Educate Global at Northern Illinois University, and it was a 6-week trip, like through a Fulbright Hayes grant, to go to East Africa with 3 NIU professors and a total of 14 students, 7 undergrad who were just approaching their student teaching, and then 7 grad. The timing was the worst. It was right when I was doing my candidacy exam, which is like very stressful. And so I emailed one of the professors and said, hey, is this going to be offered next summer? Because maybe I could do it then. And they said, no, it's this one-time deal. So I threw in my name into the hat, applied, interviewed, just thinking, well, we'll see if I actually get it. And then I have a decision to make. Well, of course, then I did. And then I had to make a decision. I was able to go and rushed to get my candidacy exam done, got it done in time, and I spent 6 weeks in rural Tanzania at a school called Nagina, which is not far from Lake Victoria. So I worked in the library there, and I taught secondary classes. I worked with Form 3 and Form 4 students, so kind of the equivalent of like a high school junior and senior. And basically taught them how to write autobiographies. So in the school I was at, the kids were working in their third language because they have their mother tongue, their native tribal language. They learn Kiswahili, which is the language that unites us all. And then they were learning in English and having to be tested in English. And the system there is very traditional. So it's like textbook, lecture, memorize, take a test. If you perform well, you move on. Okay. So to have a teacher come in and say, I want to hear your story. What song is in your heart?
Mm.
They had never had that opportunity before to be heard or to share like that. And so I worked with one of the librarians there who I still talk to almost every day on WhatsApp. His name's Moses, and he's my lovely, like my Rafiki, my friend. He and I did a showcase event. So we had the kids pick one item from their autobiography that they felt really excited about, and they put them all up on the library walls. Now, this again is a traditional library. You go in, it's full of textbooks. It has some storybooks, but it's pretty much textbook heavy. The kids come in, study. There's even a sign on the wall to be quiet. I had to really bite my tongue because that's how they do it there. And this librarian trusted me enough over the time that we spent together to allow me to just like show him how we can give the kids this sense of agency. So they all put their things up. We did little post-it notes and they went around and gave feedback. Every child wanted me to come up and take a picture of them standing next to their, their poem or their story. And I remember one boy in particular, he really struggled with English. He always had to have someone translate for me. But the picture I could start welling up right now. The picture I have of him standing next to his work and his body language and the pride he felt having his work on display like this is something that will never leave me.
Hmm.
So just to see of the power of student voice and just the relationships that we built in that short time was pretty remarkable. And then I was in Kenya for another 2.5 weeks or so at a school called the Jane Adeni Memorial School, started by the brilliant Dr. Teresa Wasanga. She should do a TED Talk. She's amazing. She built this school in honor of her mother who passed away, who never got an education. And so she created a school for girls, and many of the girls are there on scholarship, orphans, have some really traumatic stories, but they're so excited to be there because many of these girls, if they weren't in school, they would be married at like 12 and carrying water and caring for their home. That would be their life. But they get these opportunities to get an education and they work so hard and they're so grateful. And they're some of the most resilient, amazing human beings I've ever met. So a part of my heart is still in that part of the world. And I'm working with two friends, Amanda Jones, a librarian in Louisiana, who has an amazing book coming out this upcoming week, that librarian, and Tom Bober, who's a phenomenal librarian in Missouri. We're building a nonprofit called Librarians Building Libraries, and we're going to have our first project be going back to where I was in Kenya, and we're going to catalog all the books, organize the books, and train
Hmm.
librarians there. We're going to train the kids to be the librarians in that space to build a library in that school. So that is what I hope to do now, but also in my retirement, something with libraries.
Oh my gosh, that is so inspiring, and I, uh, I'm excited for your continued adventures there, and the impact that you're making there is so powerful and visceral. So, and you mentioned other librarians there, and one thing I've noticed, and I remember, I think you were at the ALA back in the spring or early summer or what have
Hmm.
San Diego, and I love how you share your learning. I just love the vibe that you share from that, and just this community, this tight-knit community of librarians. It's just a really neat. It's like, man, and I'm not a librarian, but it's like I want to hang with you all. I want to, like, I don't know if there is room for principals in ALA or what have you, but I just really appreciate just this kind of network that you're a part of and that you're all cultivating. It's really inspiring.
You absolutely are invited. Librarians are some of the most inclusive people. Like that's a core value is inclusivity. So, and we love the more the merrier. So yeah, we're down for it. But yeah, it's librarians are an interesting breed because if you think about it, it's kind of like being a principal. You're the only one in your school doing this job. So to find your people and to find that connection, I'm so grateful for Twitter because that's how I built my PLN. And going to these conferences is like a family reunion. Like I text with these people all day long. We have little group chats and we're constantly sharing things, but it's so rejuvenating and recharging to see them in person. And so I really cherish the chance to be at a conference and be with some of my people. because they are just absolutely amazing and they're all over the nation. So it's so nice that we can all come together and be with each other and support each other, especially now in these really contentious times in libraries.
Absolutely. And I think you hit a very valid point because, I often talk about uh the principalship being a very lonely gig. It can be on some days. Other days it isn't. It's very beneficial and powerful. But part of the reason why it's lonely is you're the only principal in the building. But then you also have to remember too, and that's probably why I always try to bond with our librarians in all the schools I've served, is you're the only person in your role as well. And so I would encourage, principals, assistant principals that are tuning in. If you have not develop that friendship and that rapport and most importantly that thought partnership with the librarian information specialist in your building or whatever moniker that they have. I would encourage you to do that. And Andrea is right. The just completely inclusive, inviting, so if that relationship hasn't been cultivated, here's an opportunity to do that. And it can be just something as simple as just kind of what I asked, like, hey, what's the hit book all the kids are reading right now, and what are you reading right now, or what should I read, or hey, what if we led a book study together in our schoolhouse on the anxious generation, and did that together, maybe just a few selected chapters, and go from there. So a lot of that actually that'd be kind of fun to do as I'm thinking about it. A joint book study between a principal and the librarian in the building on the anxious generation. Who knows?
That would be fascinating because you're coming at it from kind of different viewpoints too. So for sure. And doesn't always have to be books either. So like at lunch, we have lunch passes. Come in and play Connect Four with some kids or get in there in my makerspace and build some stuff. Like I love when principals are willing to come in and be vulnerable and kind of like play with the kids and get in there and get their hands a little messy. So get in, come on in and join us for, some Kagan strategies and, and talk with the kids. Yeah.
Nice nod to Kagan and Connect Four. It's one of my all-time favorite games. So, all right, Andrea, we're getting near the end here, but I have one important question. Now, before we started, you asked about the albums behind me, and there's a little bit of story behind each of those. So, um, we're getting ready to parachute onto the desert island. Okay.
Yep.
The plane is descending. The desert island is there. We have already airlifted all of the books that you need, and that and
Phew.
survival things. So that's all been taken care of. And I'm like, Andrea, let's go. The island. We got to get down. The plane's descending, and there's a crate of albums of your albums that you have with you. We can't take the crate. We can only take three. We can only take.
Three. Okay. Okay.
What are those three albums? I'm totally putting you on the spot, but and I've already picked my three. I'm crying and in pain as well with you, So I've already gotten. I'll just tell you my album, so that I've already gotten "Let It Be" by the Beatles.
Okay.
I've already gotten that. I've gotten "Kind of Blue" by Miles Davis, and then I have gotten probably Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. You know, so
Oh, I love the diversity here. Okay.
I've taken those. So go.
All right. So first one would be Fleetwood Mac's Rumors. Do I need to explain why? Like, are you
Please.
wondering why? Or you just want
Yes,
me to
I have
name them?
one.
So that one, growing up, I had a dad that really wanted me to know music, so I would get a wide range. But apparently, the story goes that when anytime that album was playing in the house and I was an infant in the crib, I would start just shaking and jamming out in the crib. And
It.
they'd put other stuff on and I wouldn't move. But then Fleetwood Mac Rumors came on. That was my jam. And I just love that album is just beautiful to this day. I can listen to it forever. The next one would probably be Fumbling Towards Ecstasy by Sarah McLachlan.
Yeah.
That is really a transformational album for where I was in my life. That was college, I think coming of age, getting through the really bad breakup with a really not so great guy. And that is my album of empowerment. So she just toured and played that album from beginning to end, and I got to see her in Chicago and was like brought to tears. It's just such a beautiful album, and she's just amazing. The last one is a little bit more modern. Again, strong female vocalist. Do you know London Grammar?
I don't. I'm not familiar. The name.
Oh, London Graham. So London Grammar is the name of the band. I love the album Truth is a Beautiful Thing. That album, the song Bones of Ribbon is what was one of my rally songs to get me to the end of that dissertation. So her Hannah, I can't think of her last name, lead singer, her voice is absolutely stunning. And I would love to see them tour in the United States at some point. So yeah, anything London Grammar, but that one in particular, that album is just stunning. And it just, so for me, each one is tethered to a memory. Like I love the soundtrack of my life.
Yeah, same here. You know, when I listen to music, although I appreciate obviously the aesthetic quality, for me, there's a lot of memories that are tied to those albums, you know. So, you know, and each of these albums back here, they're very much tied to a very specific memory. You know, in my life, they're up there for a reason. So I very much value that kind of the soundtrack of our lives, you know, and that divine chord that kind of connects us through music. So, all right, well, you know, we got our albums, we got our books, and we've got our
Yeah.
technology. We're good to go. That's a good desert island. That's a good soundtrack.
Uh, yeah, that's all I need. That and some sunshine and some good company. I'm good.
There there you go. There you go, friend. And coffee.
Yeah, I got green tea. That's my jam. Yep. Some
Gotcha.
green tea and I'm happy.
Gotcha. I got a little bit of black half caffeinated coffee left and my water. So cheers. Um,
Cheers.
if folks want to follow and connect with you and to be in your space and in your digital space and in your realm, what are the best pockets to get into?
So I'm still pretty active on Twitter, X, whatever we're going to call it. And my handle is at Andrea_Trudeau. You can also visit me on my website, which is noshush.com. So, and I know you mentioned coming out to see my library, and we have visitors all the time. And so, Sean, you of course are welcome. But if any of your listeners are interested, they are welcome to come and check us out too.
Absolutely. That's on my bucket list, friend. I'm gonna
Oh,
I want to get out there. Um, also, are you presenting anytime soon? Aren't you going to a conference? So, did I see that wrong? Or
so I haven't announced this yet, but I can now because it's official. I was going to be presenting at my statewide librarians conference, but the American Library Association asked me to, they're sending me to, get this, the United Arab Emirates to present at an international conference in Sharjah, just right near Dubai. So I will be there with Tom Bober representing American school libraries in November.
wow, congratulations! Wow,
Thank you.
Andrea,
Thank
that's
you.
amazing.
I am, so I did this in 2019. So to be able to go back again is amazing. And yeah, I'll be geeking out over my research, VR and empathy. And then we're going to be looking at historical analysis through 3D printed objects and augmented reality. So going to present some sessions there and get to meet some librarians who live in the United Arab Emirates, which is pretty amazing.
That oh my gosh, you are truly global and connected, but most importantly, my friend, you are inspiring. So I am, man, I'm so excited. I can't wait to see all the stories and adventures from there. So I'm a safe journey there, and gosh, congratulations on such a prestigious gig and moment for you.
Thank you so much, Sean.
Oh my gosh. So as I sign off here, as we're on a desert island someplace with some good music and green tea and all the things, please be sure to connect and follow my great friend and thought partner and bandmate Andrea Trudeau. I'll put all of her links and those things in the show notes. And Andrea is very, very much a giving person in the PLN and is always interacting and is always supporting. So I bet you if you tag her or respond to anything that she's putting, she's going to respond back and interact with you in a nurturing and visceral and supportive way. So. Andrea, you have an open invitation on this podcast anytime. This was great.
Thank you so much, Sean. And we truly are better together. So I appreciate this and just the chance to connect with you today and your listeners.
Awesome. As I sign off, typically don't forget to share with the world your dreams, your ideas, your insights, because you make the world a better place and the world definitely needs you, just like Andrea. This is Sean Gaylor. This is the Principal Liner Notes podcast. Catch you on the flip side or catch you at the library.